I'm here with Project Reality developers.
Afternoon, the developer of Project Reality.
Max Booz, I'm a beta tester.
And today I'm going to cover some questions that are probably on your mind about Project Reality and the new release that they're coming out with exactly today actually. So, the factions. What new factions have implemented and what changes you've made to the previous ones?
We have introduced two new factions, the French Forces and the African Resistance Fighters. This started out as a community faction, so made by community members, and eventually got added to PR and is released today. They get a couple of new interesting vehicles and weapons. For example, they get the AMX-10 RC wheeled reconnaissance vehicle and tank destroyer. It's quite a mouthful actually. They get high explosive frag rifle grenades. They get a Leclerc battle tank, which has a 50 cal heavy machine gun, which is capable of taking out enemy APCs without firing your main gun. And that is quite unique to any main battle tank in PR, to be honest. They also get a French Eurocopter, and this one does have a nose gun, unlike the German version. And the entire contingent of French vehicles is geared towards fast movement and high agility. And all of this is based upon the current military hardware and doctrine of the French armed forces. And the French are also featured as UN forces on one map. Now then there's the African Resistance Fighters, which is basically a generic African militia. They are armed with machetes, the M79 grenade launcher, and this is the only grenade launcher in PR that has a buckshot round. This is quite intense. Let's see, they get technicals with gunner shields, extensive availability of semi-auto and automatic weapons, available to all squad members. It's quite an interesting. It's just similar to the Insurgents, except I think they are better armed.
Yeah, so as Afternoon already said, we have the two new forces, and the French forces, as he already said, they're the most agile and geared towards high-speed movement. This is very noticeable in all of their armored vehicles. If you look at what he already said, the AMX-10, it's a tank destroyer and a recon vehicle that's basically a tank but on wheels. All of their APCs, the VAB and the VBCI, whether you're familiar with those terms or not, they're all featuring wheels instead of tracks. So this is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out in 100-player servers that we're introducing as well. So we'll see how it works out when we have a conventional faction that is geared towards high movement, and like some of the other conventional factions that we have. And yeah, as he already said, the ARF, African Resistance Fighters, they're more heavily armed than the insurgents we already have in the game. But they're still a kind of irregular force geared towards CQC combat, and we're trying to make the maps to resemble their in real life scenario. So we're trying to get all of that urban environment in there and jungle environment to see how the close quarters work out.
Right, so moving away from the factions onto weapons, so what sort of new weapons or kits will we see, and what sort of weapons, sort of systems such as sights will we see on the weapons?
Well, we have about 25 new weapons, 8 new explosive devices, 20 updated weapons models, and pretty much every weapon has had a newly designed animation set. One thing that I'm really looking forward to using in-game is the backup iron sights. I think they're quite amazing. Backup sights are designed to provide the operator with an alternative method to acquisition a target, depending on the situation. Provided the weapon has backup sights equipped, a player will be able to quickly switch between backup sights and optics using the comma rows. Now there's also another thing with weapons. We went back to the drawing board for deviation and suppression. We changed the animations between stances and transition between weapons. And next to weapons we introduced 2 additional request kits. There's the machine gunner and the spotter. The machine gunner is similar to the support kit, but carries a much heavier machine gun. And the spotter can assist the sniper or go on recon, request area attacks, etc.
Yeah, so as Afternoon already mentioned, we went back to the drawing board for deviation, or at least one of our devs did. And so far, as a beta testing team, it has been a real interesting experience to try and work everything out. Obviously, we have to make sure that deviation hits that sweet spot where it's not overpowered, but it's, you know, good. You can still use it. So we had a lot of testing going on there. Make sure every single weapon behaves as it should. We actually have a team member as well who lives in the United States, and he goes shooting quite regularly, and he's provided us with a lot of good input about how the weapon should handle, and it's real interesting to get a feel for it again, because you have to relearn everything from the beginning. And you know, these are the kind of things that provide PR with the sweet spot in between regular Battlefield 2 and Arma 2. So pretty much a lot of work has been put into that, and we've tested rigorously. We'll see how it plays out.
Sounds very good. So, are you saying there's no more 7-second rule, or is there still going to be a little rule that you'll have to learn in your head, or is it completely random?
Well, there is a little rule, but it's been decreased significantly, and especially if you're using scope weapons now, it's going to be a lot more useful to actually use your scope. Maybe you've noticed previously it would be more useful to use iron sights in half of the scenarios. Now there's a really fine line between when you have to switch to iron sights and when you're better off using a scope, and the 7-second rule is definitely gone.
So moving on from weapon systems, let's move on to vehicles. So what new vehicles we've seen? We've also covered a little bit of this in the factions for the French and the Somalian militia, but what will we see new, or what changes will we see in the actual vehicles themselves?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Obviously, as you said, the French forces will get a whole bunch of new vehicles, but obviously the other factions are not without any love either. So looking at air vehicles, for example, we've had a lot of new models come in, and a lot of old models being touched up as well. One of our devs has basically been put on the job to do just air vehicles, and the entire system has been overhauled. Flares now exit from the right positions on vehicles. We have entirely new classes. One of the, I think, most expected vehicles in the game right now will be the Mi-24 Hind, the iconic Russian attack helicopter, which is finally featured in PR right now. Other than that, we have a whole load of new airplanes, and for example, the USMC now has a proper attack jet. We now have the Harrier for the USMC and the FA-18, and a whole range of other vehicles that I guess you'll just have to experience. Other than that, obviously land vehicles. We have some new main battle tanks, mainly for the French forces. But yeah, you'll see heavily armored vehicles. You'll see them on the ground, but I think most interesting is most likely the BMP2, the BMP series. You know, iconic for the Soviet bloc. Finally featured in PR as well. So that's one of the things that you can look forward to. And there's really not much more to say about the vehicles right now yet. You just have to experience it.
So moving on to more of the gameplay mechanics themselves, the sound and the visuals have been altered. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Well, 3 years ago this month, we put together a joint recording session with Bohemia Interactive, the makers of Arma, and to record Arma sounds at the British Military Arma Centre in Bovington. And the results of that trip inspired us and our community members to upgrade the audio effects of our entire mod, making things even more realistic. What once started as an independent sound mod for PR, the community member stepped forward and said, I'm gonna make new sounds. And he has become a dev, and it has grown into a full-blown modification of our sounds. And pretty much everything got replaced. We've overhauled the suppression effects, audio effects, visual effects, explosions. We've also recorded new voiceovers for various factions, and we're still working on getting more voices done.
So yeah, everything's been changed, and in the game this really reflects on a lot. I mean, if you run into the environment now and a bullet whizzes by your head, it feels a bit more engaging. But it gets better when you're playing, especially now with the 100 players in the server. There's more explosions, there's more shooting, there's more of everything, and the effects, they're better, the sounds, they're better, everything sounds more immersive, and with the 100 players, it's just a sight to behold. We have had the open beta, and just to see all the choppers flying overhead and hydras going off around you while there's a BTR pushing up through the smoke, those are the moments you really want to be in.
And that concludes the interview, so I'm going to have to thank you guys for stopping by and giving the community some more information on the latest release of the Project Reality mod. Thanks for coming by, and hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.